you, Emily, for inviting me to participate. This is a great opportunity for us to raise awareness about the challenges people with disabilities have when they travel. And like Stephen said, I'm a former flight attendant. I flew back in the 70s and 80s, and I went to school at the same time to get the prerequisites to become a physician assistant. And usually the $64 million question I get is, how in the world did you transition from being a flight attendant to a physician assistant? And the answer to that is, it was literally by accident. I had an automobile accident the first year that I started flying, and one of my surgeons had a physician assistant. So after that, I was sort of struck by the thunderbolt and went back to school. And then finally, after about 15 years of that, working in cardiac surgery, I transitioned over to the pharmaceutical industry, where I was a nationwide manager for a team of medical science liaisons. And I became a frequent flyer during those years. And at that point, I was introduced to a friend who's a triple amputee. And he had the question, you know, how are they getting me out of the airplane in an emergency evacuation? And so that happened about a year and a half ago, and that was the conversation that sparked the idea for ADAPTS. So basically today we'll just run through this agenda that I've planned for us. I just gave you the background a little bit, and I'll state the problem and sort of what the story is and the solution that I came up with. And then we'll conclude and have some time for discussion. I do have a couple of videos embedded in the slides that Stephen's going to help me with when it comes time to play them, so that you don't get tired of my voice. We'll change it up a little bit. I also want to apologize in advance because my office is right on a busy street, and I'm between a fire station and a hospital, so there may be an ambulance that goes by. So anyway, I apologize for the background noise since I don't get to mute my line. So we'll move on to the next slide here. And Stephen, if you'll get that video teed up. This is just a depiction of you know, various places where emergencies happen. As you can see, I've got a lot of airplane pictures in here because ADAPTS started as a product to use on the airplane. One thing I think was really a salient feature of why this was needed was because people don't realize that people with disabilities traveling on a flight have their wheelchair checked in cargo. So if an emergency happens, they don't have a way to get to the slide. And even if they had their chair, the chair wouldn't be able to go down the inflatable slide. So ADAPTS had to be something that would be very, very fast and easy, no assembly required, intuitive to use, but it also couldn't have any buckles or sharp points that might poke a hole in the evacuation slide. So this first video is one that our marketing team put together for us. I think it's really brief, but it'll sort of give you the background of what we're trying to do.
My name is Wearley, and I am the inventor of ADAPTS, a Disabled Passenger Transfer Sling. I was a flight attendant for 10 years. No one wants to think about emergencies, but they do happen. ADAPTS helps passengers with disabilities exit the aircraft safely and swiftly. ADAPTS is designed to fit on any airplane seat, whether it's a first class seat or a coach seat. ADAPTS is soft, water resistant, flame resistant, and it easily folds into its own tote for easy portability. We've established a Kickstarter campaign. If you're as passionate as we are about making sure that passengers with disabilities are able to travel the world, please contribute.
Great, thanks. So, so our next slide is a depiction about, there's a lot on here, so I'll unpack it for you, but currently the method for getting passengers out of an airplane in an evacuation is what the airlines call grab and run or grab and go. And it involves someone grabbing the passenger from under the shoulders and another person grabbing them from behind the knees and then running down the aisle toward the exit. It makes a lot of assumptions, and that being that the passenger has legs. It might be an amputee like my friend John, or it could be someone that has a neurological condition that doesn't allow for any upper body resistance when they're grabbed from behind. Not to mention, it's kind of hard to stand in the aisle and lean over sideways to grab someone from behind. So depending on their disability, you know, it could also add further injury. We have another video to show you that another paraplegic, this is a young man named Jeff Butler, who's on Team USA for rugby. He's a silver medalist on the rugby team, and he has a YouTube channel that reviews assistive devices. So when he heard about this, he wanted to put it on his channel and run his video showing, he's an actual paraplegic, showing him using the slide, or using the sling, I'm sorry. So we have that teed up for this particular slide.
Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to be reviewing a product that's going to help people with disabilities evacuate in case of emergency. Stay tuned. So as a Paralympic athlete and USA wheelchair rugby player, I travel a ton, both domestically and internationally. And up until I got this product, I hadn't really thought about the best way for people with physical disabilities to evacuate and get to safety in case of emergency. And after a little bit more research, I found out that most modes of transportation don't actually have a really good plan on what to do with people with disabilities in an emergency situation. The FAA has a 90-second evacuation rule. What that means is that every single airplane, from a really small puddle jumper all the way up to the biggest A380, has to be able to evacuate in 90 seconds or less all of their passengers in case of an emergency. If they don't meet that 90-second standard, they're not allowed to fly in the US. So, you know, I'm not an expert in this, but it got me thinking, I know it takes me more than 90 seconds just to transfer from an airline seat to my everyday chair, and that's in a perfect situation. So what happens if there's, you know, more than one wheelchair user on the plane, or what happens if my whole team's on the plane? The current method for getting someone with physical disabilities off of the plane in case of an emergency is called the grab and go method. Pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. The flight attendants and crew are supposed to come up to the person who is the physical disability, grab them, and get them off the plane as safely and efficiently as possible. That sucks. You know, I'm having this image in my head where I'm getting drug off this plane through glass and debris and smoke and fire and all these things, and it's just not working out. That's where the ADAPTS system comes into play. ADAPTS stands for a Disabled Passenger Transfer Sling. In the event of an emergency, the ADAPTS sling works basically like a collapsible stretcher. It allows crew and other able-bodied passengers to help those with disabilities get off the plane as quickly and safely as possible. So I really wanted to put this sling to the test, but it was surprisingly hard to find an airplane. Apparently there are like rules and regulations around that. Who would have thought, right? But I did the next best thing, which is recruiting a bunch of friends to come over to my house and carry me around in it. So let's see how it works. Alright, so here we are, testing out the ADAPTS travel sling. My lifting crew has been assembled, and we're going to see what it's like to carry me around with it. So here we go. The most effective one we found was carrying, you had one lifter on kind of the front right corner and one lifter on the back left corner, and they were able to really pretty efficiently and effectively carry you down the aisle at that point. Alright, so joining us is David. He was one of the lifting crew on the ADAPTS transfer sling. So, I want to know what you think the biggest advantage of being able to use the sling versus just having to carry me off an airplane would be.
Yeah, I think the easiest part about using the sling is getting you out of the chair. You don't have to bend over as much. It's a lot easier to lift from the backside. I think it's a lot more doable in a high risk situation.
The ADAPTS sling and products like it are super important, right? I mean, these are products that are potentially going to help save our lives. It's crazy to me that airlines haven't really thought through what they're going to do if the plane crashes with people with disability, right? The grab and go method, more like the grab and pray you can get me off the plane before it bursts into flames, right? That's nuts. So the ADAPTS team has created a change.org petition to lobby Congress to help protect passengers with disabilities. I really urge you guys to sign that, share it with your friends, have them sign it. I'll post the details in the description below. And they've also launched a Kickstarter to help get the product off the ground. So, like I said, I urge you to sign the petition, share the petition. If you feel inclined to donate to the Kickstarter, that's awesome. I'll put all the details in the description below. And that's the video for this week, guys. As always, like, share, and subscribe.
So like Jeff mentioned in that video, currently the airlines are making the assumptions for evacuating passengers based on a study that was conducted by the FAA for the Department of Transportation back in 1977. So in 40 years, much has changed on the airlines. Not only are disabled people traveling more than they ever used to, thanks to the Air Carriage Accessibility Act that came out about 10 years after that 1977 study, but also they're cramming more people into airplanes, and the rows between seats are getting more narrow, so it's getting more difficult to get into the row to get someone out, or for people to get out around someone on the aisle that might be needing extra help. If they're on the outboard seat, the middle seat or the window seat, they can't move till the aisle person moves. So, yeah, I basically, after talking to John on the phone that one evening, I tossed and turned all night and got my yoga mat out and some rope and fashioned the first prototype, which is, as you see it up here in the left-hand corner. That was February of 2016, and from there I moved over to a slip and slide that I ordered off the internet so that I could cut and tape and move it around, and then at that point I called a patent attorney because I sort of felt like maybe I was onto something. And then I dug out the sewing machine that my parents had given me for Christmas many years ago and was filled with cobwebs. And I fashioned my own sling out of cotton muslin and made the handles by hand. So that was a couple of months later. And then finally I was introduced to a young woman named Andrea Makalan, who is an incredible seamstress and prototype developer, and she made the first pattern for ADAPTS out of old bridesmaids material. So this one is pink. And then I got the idea to buy the material that the life vests are made out of on the airplane. So this gray one here is made from that polyurethane coated nylon, which is flame retardant and water resistant. And at this point we were still fashioning the handles by hand, and at that we decided that was too labor intensive, so we bought webbing. And by January of this year we had a prototype made in blue and red, which we thought would blend in with the area around. However, because disabled passengers are brought on early before all the other passengers, especially if they use an aisle chair, they get settled, and as other passengers come on, they have no inclination that this person is disabled, maybe doesn't have the use of their legs, and is blending in on the airplane fine, but in an emergency, they really want to stand out as someone who needs help. So we made it in this bright yellow color, which is the same color as the life vests and other emergency equipment, the evacuation slides and so on the airplane. And as you can see here, the sling folds up into a convenient travel tote so that the person could actually put it behind them as they move through, the airport or hotels or cruise ships, wherever it is they're traveling, and have it available for when they either need to use it or want to have it, accessible. Ideally, the person would sit on it during the flight so that in the event, especially at takeoff and landing, so in the event of an emergency, they would be able to instantly be helped. But it's not absolutely necessary. There's a little bit of lag time, and depending in an emergency, there's a little bit of lag time between opening doors and getting people into the aisle. So, depending on how agile the person is, someone like Jeff is really it's really easy for him to just put it out on a chair and slip onto on the chair next to him and slip onto it. So that's a possibility if someone doesn't want to sit on it the entire time. So for the next slide, this is the actual product design specifications. This is how it sits on the seat. There's a strap that holds it to the top and back, but that's made of elastic, so when you grab the handle, it easily pulls up from the back and you move into the aisle. During the flight, like I mentioned, if you don't want to sit with it on the seat, you can roll it down in the back and just sit on the seat part. We did a focus group recently, and they asked if they could put their own wheelchair cushion on top of this, and we encourage that because you want to be as comfortable as possible on the airplane, and if it happens that you pick the ADAPTS up, then the wheelchair cushion would go right along with it. And then this just depicts on the right-hand side here the measurements. It measures about a foot square, and it weighs just a hair over a pound, and then it folds up into itself so that it can easily be transported. It's made out of, like I mentioned, the life vest material, and there are actually 6 handles, 2 on either side, and 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom. So while on an airplane you're challenged by the narrow aisle, so you pretty much have to do head to foot there. So the passenger is sort of cradled as if in a hammock between the 2 rescuers. If you happen to have a situation where you're in a hotel or even on a cruise ship, then you could have up to 4 or 6 rescuers each take a handle on either side. In a little bit I'll show you a video of what that looks like. But it can be used, like I said, trains, buses. I even had someone come up to me at the Abilities Expo this past weekend and say this would be great for people who want to ride the rides at Disneyland and have trouble getting from their wheelchair into the ride. Not to mention if there's an emergency during the time the ride is underway. And Stephen, if you want to click on this picture to tee up that video, that'd be great.
Travel emergencies happen. What's your plan? The first of its kind for aeroplanes, ADAPTS is a portable device designed to assist wheelchair travelers in the event of an emergency evacuation. A must-have for anyone who travels using a wheelchair and for businesses who serve them. Lightweight, easy to store, and it even doubles up as a comfortable lumbar pillow. Go to adapts.org to reserve yours today. Get packing and see the world with ADAPTS.
So this next slide just basically reviews what I've already said, how it's portable and lightweight, water and flame resistant. Person can travel with it, and we're making it affordable for the disability community. And also it's made in the United States, and when we get up and running, it'll be handled in Los Angeles at a sewing factory there. And lastly, this is just more of the same, what we've discussed already. It couldn't have any sharp buckles or frames. It cradles the passenger between the 2 rescuers. I think the salient point about why this is important is based on that 1977 study, the recommendation from the FAA was that the disabled passengers should be seated as far away from the exits as possible, so as not to impede the egress of the able-bodied passengers. And I understand that the idea behind that is to get as many people up and out as fast as possible, and that organizing a person that maybe has some disability or mobility issues may take a little bit more time. But with ADAPTS, they can be seated around everybody else, and the people seated around them would then become their rescuers. They wouldn't have to wait for someone like the crew to come back into the airplane to help them get out of the aircraft. So that's really the biggest point, I think, about having it obvious and bright yellow, and you know, the ability to brief the passenger behind and across the aisle, because they would then become the person who would jump up and grab the top handles from the back and jump into the aisle and grab the lower handles from the side and go down the aisle.
Robin, Joe had Joe from SVILC had his hand up. Joe, was there something you wanted to ask?
Hi, Joe.
So, hi, Robin. So I use a wheelchair. I'm a quad, just like Jeff is, and the only way I can see, and I've flown dozens of times, and it seems like the only way this is going to work in a timely fashion is if this thing is already set up for me when I sit down. Is that right?
Well, yes, ideally that would be what we recommend, but we recognize that people maybe don't want to sit on it the entire flight. So then you have it set up, and I'm sitting. So now I'm sitting in this bright yellow evacuation sling, and other passengers are getting on, and they're looking at me like, "What's going on with this guy? Why is he sitting in this yellow thing?" Oh, that's in case of an emergency. And it's like, it's almost like kind of I'm showing that I'm paranoid in that way, but I just don't see it being able to be used in a timely manner other than having this thing already up and in bright yellow, like I'm ready for a disaster. Right. Yeah, I appreciate that, and all I can say is, as time goes by and people become more familiar with it, just like the life vest under each seat, for example, people will just realize what it is. But that's also why I suggest that during the flight, you know, you can roll it down behind you and just sit on the lower portion of it, so that for takeoff and landing, just like you would put your tray table up and stow your bags away, then at takeoff and landing you would hook it back up to the back of the seat. But yeah, I mean, oftentimes, I mean, even flights down to Florida, for example, there can be 15 or 20 wheelchairs, and so you might actually have 15 or 20 people sitting on it. Jeff travels with his team out of Austin, and you know, they have like a dozen guys that travel together sometimes. And so, yeah, there may be, as time goes by, more awareness, and people just understand what it is that they see. But I get that. That's one of the reasons why we thought about making it in another color that blends in with the decor of the airplane. So, you know, that's a possibility for the future too. We'll show you a video a little bit later on of what it looks like on the airplane. We actually used it on a flight this last weekend. So back to this slide. This depicts, you know, a to rescue, the position head and foot. But once you get out of the airplane, or like I mentioned, in a hallway or stairwell, then you can go side by side with people grabbing either side, or the handles at the top and bottom. If a person needs extra support at the neck, you can actually have 2 people on either side here holding these handles, and that strengthens the back of this to cradle the neck as well. This is a depiction of some other scenarios where ADAPTS may come in handy. People who stay in hotels get to the hallway and into the hallway where the stairwell is, and oftentimes they're instructed to wait on first responders to get to them. And you know, that could be some time, whereas there may be people in the hotel hallway, other rooms nearby, or their travel companions who can use ADAPTS to help them get down the stairway rather than waiting on first responders. This picture on the right-hand side was the Las Vegas shooting. You know, if this man had had an ADAPTS, you know, using it behind his chair, just tucked away as a lumbar pillow, he could have been helped out a little more quickly, maybe spread it down on the ground and then people pick it up and run out with him rather than running over rubble and debris. And same goes for the man in the chair that's in the flood. You know, people could help carry him out faster than trying to roll through the water. So Steve and I have a video teed up for this scenario also, I think. this is almost nearing the end of the presentation, so these are our links. I have a link to SurveyMonkey that we'll share with you, unless, Stephen, you want to pull that up. But it's 12 questions. Takes about 4 or 5 minutes to do, and we're trying to get data from people who are actual wheelchair users that travel, that we can share with the airlines, the Flight Attendants Union, and the FAA. And so if you do use a wheelchair, we'd appreciate your hearing your voice on this survey. The other links are to the change.org petition that Jeff mentioned. We'd like to commission the FAA to do an updated study on how to best help disabled passengers out of airplanes on an airplane that is currently in service. The 727 that the original study was done on does no longer fly. And we'd like to see those studies done on airplanes that have more passengers today and more of a demographic like today's passengers. When the FAA conducts the airworthiness test for the 90-second rule, those are people who are between the ages of 21 and 65, and if they have any mobility issues, they're excluded from that test. So that means no elderly people, no obese people, no people traveling with emotional support animals, no people traveling with children or toddlers that might be slow to get out of the airplane, and certainly no people with disabilities. So we want to see something that's more relevant to real life today. And then, as mentioned a couple times, we've got the project posted on Kickstarter so that we can raise funds to get into production. And Kickstarter, the deadline is December 18th, which is a little short of 2 weeks from today. And then these are our social media platforms at the bottom. And this is our team. The left is Yasin. He's Director of Operations for us. He's helping source the materials and organize the factory. Jeremy, to the right of him, is our social media and marketing manager. John Morris is the fellow in the middle. He's an author, and he blogs under the name of wheelchairtravel.org. And he's got extensive travel experience, uses a power chair. He's a triple amputee from an accident that he had 3 years ago. And since that time, he's taken almost 600 flights using his wheelchair, most times traveling by himself. I'm to the right of John, and then behind me is Logan, who is our Director of Sales. And that's the presentation as it is for today. I'm happy to take more questions, and you can certainly contact me at robin@adapts.org. If you want to reach out personally, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this point. Joe, did that help answer some of your concerns?
So far, sort of, yeah. Yeah,
it's no matter what method you use to help someone out of the airplane, it's going to take extra time. So, like I said, ideally you'd be sitting on it, but I think, the main thing is raising awareness about the current plan for the air travel especially is just inadequate for helping people with mobility issues get out of the airplane.
Hi, this is Emily. This is Emily from CFLC, and I have done a site visit or two with our logistics coordinator, and there's something that most hotels don't have available, and we are trying to make available is evacuation wheelchairs for individuals with disabilities. And in the meantime, now we want to start speaking to the hotels that we hold events at, and it explained a bit about this product specifically, and it's a much more cost-effective option than evacuation wheelchairs. That's usually the big issue that hotels have with evacuation wheelchairs, but this helps with being able to, it's better than nothing in those evacuation situations. So like Robin said, not only cruise ships or airplanes, but also any place there may be an evacuation. During the fires in California, I know a lot of people weren't able to evacuate. Having this product in their home, if they're a person with a disability, might be beneficial as well. So it's not just for commercial use, but personal use as well. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Emily. And in fact, I recently stayed at a hotel in New York, the Roosevelt, that's 15 floors. And I asked them how many accessible rooms they had in the hotel, and they said 2 on every floor. And so that means there are 30 accessible rooms in a hotel that has 15 floors. So they would have to have one of if the hotel were full, they would have to have one of those collapsible chairs or portable chairs at least on every floor. And if they happen to have a floor where both accessible rooms were occupied, then who's going to wait their turn, to get down the stairs? And so, same with the cruise ships. During the drills, apparently, I learned that they shut down. They actually allow the elevators to be used during the drills on a cruise ship. But in real life, those elevators are shut down. So depending on where you are on the cruise ship, you may or may not be able to get to your muster station without having someone carry you up or down a flight of stairs. And then when you get to the muster station, to get into your lifeboat, you wouldn't be able to take your chair. So that's another place. I mean, my idea was that when people check into an accessible room, they would be issued an ADAPTS in a sealed bag and take it to the room with them. And if they had a fire drill or an earthquake or some other kind of disaster, they would be able to lay it out on the bed and roll onto it and then, be carried out. Same with the cruise ship. And then when they check out, they could return it to the desk, or they could decide to buy it for themselves and take it with them, to their next, wherever they travel. And same for the airlines. I mean, the idea would be that the airlines would have them on board anytime a person with a disability that had a mobility issue needed to book a ticket. It would just be noted in their record that it would need to be available on the flight. They could have a certain number of them on the flight and available to pass out, but typically that might be only 4 or 5 per airplane. If you had a team traveling together or a large number of wheelchair users, then you'd have to find some more from some other source for that particular flight. Or people could bring their own if they wanted to. If you brought your own, then the rest of your trip you'd have it with you in the hotel or wherever else you visited. But yeah, I'm putting one in my earthquake kit. I'm getting, who knows if the big one hits San Francisco and the neighborhood is rubble and you need to help a neighbor who was injured in the earthquake get out, and first responders are overwhelmed in those situations trying to help people. So yeah, the fires in North County and even what you guys are having down in Southern California sort of drove that point home too. Anyone else have a comment? Or, well, like I said, if you think of something later, feel free to email me, and we can discuss further. And I'd be really happy if any of you who are using wheelchairs would fill out that wheelchair traveler survey for me. And please do access John Morris's blog. It's a wealth of information, wheelchairtravel.org.
Okay, well, does anybody else have any questions at all for Robin or comments? Well, thank you, Robin, for the great presentation. I think it's a great, an awesome invention that's definitely needed. So I'm excited to find out, to continue to follow you and see what's going on with it. We'll send out all of the links that she talked about after the webinar, and we'll also send the recording. The recording won't go out until 7 to 14 business days. That we'll post that and send out the links for that. But we'll also send out either today or tomorrow the links that she had mentioned, the SurveyMonkey and Kickstarter and the Change.org petition. So thank you all for attending today. We appreciate it, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Robin.